Hello there, and in this video we are going to take a look at how to add a dynamic property onto the DockShell root shell and then have code initiated from LightSwitch update that property. So what we've done is we've got the standard shell here, and at the bottom we've added another column. We just moved out the other columns. This was originally at column 0 and this was at column 1, so we've moved them to column 1 and 2. And we've added this other text box, and we've included this binding to this property called SumLabel. Now, SumLabel doesn't exist at this point, so let's take a look at what we've done to add that in. So the first thing that we did was we created an interface which sits within the Solution Explorer inside the provider project. So if we go to our expand here and look at our interfaces folder and open that up, you can see that SumLabel is the only property, and it's a getter setter property. If it was only read-only, it would be just a getter. But we want to be able to update this property, and we want to have this property bind to that XAML element that we were just looking at. In other words, to this text box down here. So if we look at, so we've created this interface, and now we go to the root DockShell root view model, and this view model is actually the same view model that's used by the shell root. So if you go to the shell root and you actually go to the code, view the code, you can see here that we are importing and setting a property called ViewModel with a thing called an iDockShell root view model. There's only one, and only one of those, and it is defined in your provider. And so this is a way by which you can update your provider and add or extend a property. So we've added this private variable or string called SumLabel, and we're implementing the new interface called iExtended DockShell root view model. And if we look down in here, somewhere in here, we have this public property, which is implements the SumLabel property off the iExtend DockShell root view model. So now we've got our property inside our view model, and because we're using this raise property changed and setting this to SumLabel, that will automatically update the view, this field, this text block, when that property changes. So when the change happens in the when something writes to this property, to the SumLabel property, it'll automatically update that. So that's already ready to go. And so once that's done, we simply compile our provider project. So give it a build. Yeah. So when that's done, now let's see how we can get access to the DockShell root view model at runtime. And so to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some existing code that we already had earlier in our project, which was a inside our client. We created a bunch of UI fragments, and one of them's a button. So if I click on that, and this button is a UI fragment that we've actually modeled to show up on our model I'll just open that up and show you that. Two places, one here and one down here. And this button, so basically these are of the same UI fragment, so they're going to initiate the same action. If we look at the code behind for that UI fragment button, you can see on the onActivate, which is a click event for that button. And what we're doing here is we are getting access to the DockShell root view model by going through the application and this DockShell service proxy. This DockShell service proxy is code generated for us automatically when we save the model. You'll see it right here. It's inside the code generated class, inside the application, and it's a property. And this is kind of like your gateway into DockShell at runtime. And so one of the things that DockShell uses a lot is math to get the various exports that a user would model. And in this scenario here, we're going to go and get an object or an instance of the DockShell root view model. And because it's set up so that you can only ever have one of these, it's always going to return the instance of the one associated to the given shell that you have. Okay. So with that in hand, we check to make sure that it is there, that we did in fact get the right view model. And then of course now what we want to do is we want to set the property some label. To do that, we simply cast the root shell view model using this try-catch approach, cast approach. And again, we check to make sure that that was successful. And if it's successful, we just set the property some label equal to the current time. So let's see what this looks like at runtime. All right. So with the user interface open now, you can see that we have this button and we have this button. And basically, they do the same thing. So what I'll do is I'll put a breakpoint on this line of code and pull that back. And now let's run that line of code. And so if we step through, you'll notice that the DockShell instance of the root view model is there. And if we look at this and expand this, you can see that we actually have the actual view model instance, which isn't all that particularly interesting, but it does allow you to get access to the actual view if you wanted to do a DOM manipulation of sorts. And of course, all the other properties that are associated to that. And one of them, obviously, is going to be our new sum property. And if we scroll down, or sum label, sorry, and you can see that currently it's set to some default text. And that is evident on the actual application. We didn't see it, but it is there. So if I hit continue, you can see that the time down here has changed. So what we'll do is take that breakpoint off now and hit the button this way. You can see now it's 31, 34, 36, and so forth. So there's the example of adding a label to your shell and being able to access it at runtime. This was a very simple process. So let's just recap what we did. We created a new property within the backing view model for the shell. You can do this with any control, by the way, in DockShell. Then we added that binding, data binding to a XAML element within our shell. In this case, it was a text block down here. And after we did all of that, we created an interface to support that new property off of the view model. And the reason that we did that was so that once we got the view model, if we didn't have that extended interface, there would be no way that we could actually access that property. It wouldn't be exposed because it's not part of the standard DockShell root view model. But we know that if we cast that existing instance, we know that it supports the extended DockShell root view model. This is our custom interface that we've added. And once we have that, we know that then we can just simply update the property at runtime. Hopefully that gives you good insight into how you can manipulate views dynamically within DockShell. Thanks and have a good day.